Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Trevor, for the introduction, and you're very right. I like to shout about the dairy industry at any opportunity because I really do believe it's the best sector out there. I was only thinking yesterday, if someone had told me 11 years ago that I'd be milking cows, let alone let loose to investigate the future of our sector, I probably would have thought they were mad. But we're here today, so let's go for it. Firstly, I would like to thank my sponsor, Trehane. They've been amazing support along the way. Karen, Diana, and Tony kicking me up the ass when I've needed it, but very much being there for me. Guy himself has become more than a sponsor and become a true friend, and I'm really grateful that this scholarship made our paths cross. I'm very aware that this topic might only appeal to 1% of you, but I have seen some socks and sandals wearing farmers in the audience, so I'm hoping maybe this will appeal to them. I will tell you this, organic is really only just another brand, and like with any other brand, it has a reputation and a story, but it needs to adapt to reduce its risk of fading. So at the time of applying for Nuffield in 2023, organic milk price was at 44p, well below the cost of production, and feed was heading towards £600 a tonne. A big chunk of our organic pool had left, and all the while the climate was throwing every challenge at us. So this journey started with a financial question, but quickly became a question about identity, values, and vision, and what was its future? And was it still right for our business and for others like it? Like many, we become organic because it looked good on paper, and over time it became how we farmed. We even got emotionally attached to those weeds. So even when the bottom line was seriously under pressure, we struggled to see past it. As Winston Churchill once said, the further backwards you look, the further forwards you see. So to understand its future, we need to take an honest look at where it came from. Organic did not begin as a club, it began as a rebellion. The early pioneers were trying to break the mold of the post-war industrial farming to be less dependent on synthetic inputs. Over time, this was formalized, and standards, inspections, labels brought trust and scale. But they also changed what organic had become. It started as a movement, and it became a system and became one of the most regulated spaces in farming. With this in mind, I set off on my travels with one clear objective: to see what was happening around the globe and bring lessons back. I visited a few weird and wonderful countries, and it became a running joke that I was on my gap year that I'd never had. When I surveyed 50 farmers, 70% of them said that policy support was important to their business. And within Europe, strong support had helped farmers not only convert, but access markets more efficiently. In Denmark, the government owns the certification body, and they also run a scheme which awards restaurants bronze, silver, or gold, depending on how much organic produce they use. Public procurement policy creates a steady, reliable market for milk. In Austria, I saw how the organic wine sector is one of the fastest growing parts of agriculture, growing 10% year on year. And many, including my dad, see this as this natural way of producing wine as a perfectly good excuse to finish a bottle. It's a great example of it becoming part of the mainstream. And then there was Azerbaijan. And I can probably hear some of you saying, why did you end up in Azerbaijan? But they were hosting COP, and I thought, why not? There, nothing matters more than food security. When you share a border with Russia and 90% of your milk comes from there, organic environmental standards absolutely do not enter the conversation. On my day off from COP, I was pretty bored from sitting in a room the whole time, and I decided to hire a car from the airport. It had 300,000 kilometers on the clock, and I set off to visit a dairy I'd found on Google Maps. Halfway through the desert, I broke down. My top tip to any of you future Nuffield scholars is download the Uber app and have $100 in your back pocket at all times. It will get you out some serious holes. Eventually, I reached the farm, no appointment, no contacts, and no idea what I was walking into. Feeling slightly like a low-budget James Bond film, I handed over every card I owned, including my library card, to get through security. A full milk processing plant, an abattoir, space for 10,000 cows arriving the next month, and no cubicles, just barns stacked high of small bales of straw, their plan to bed them up by hand. With only small-scale farmers locally, this was their solution to food security, big centralised state-backed. Sri Lanka opened my eyes to whether no policy was actually better than bad policy. In the start of 2021, Sri Lankan government banned all pesticides and fertilisers overnight, blaming them for the rise in kidney disease amongst farmers. The results were devastating, yields halved, export income collapsed, and within a year the decision was quietly reversed. It's a country where the government owns 90% of the land, and most Sri Lankans don't drink fresh milk. If we were going to invest anywhere in the world, it might be here. There's cheap labour, a great climate, and a growing economy. And as we see consumers grow in wealth, we often see them move to dairy products. I saw farms with facilities built for 200 cows, better equipped than many at home, but only milking 40 cows because they didn't have the knowledge to get them to milking age. There is a huge potential here, and the biggest gap was knowledge. It was a sharp contrast in Indonesia, where I found myself running a 2-day workshop for Ala, our milk buyer, who was supporting a community to access a formal market. Their cows were producing between 20 and 30 litres a day, compared to Sri Lanka of only 8 litres a day. And this gap, when you only have 2 to 3 cows, is the difference between feeding your family or not. Instead, they were using organic principles and better genetics as a practical framework to lift production and welfare. It really brought home that knowledge exchange is a real game changer, and the whole experience was quite emotional. I saw farmers bringing their milk by mopeds to a bulk milk tank, delivering it into a plastic jug, recording it with a pencil and measuring it with a manual thermometer. It was probably the closest I'll see to milk production in the past. Genetics was a theme I saw throughout my travels. In every thriving business, they had matched the cow to the system. It might sound basic, but it was striking how consistent it was. I was blown away on the Nuffield dairy tour last year in North Wales when we visited Morgan Tudor. It was probably the best herd of cows I have ever seen. I will never complain about farming on a hill again after going to Morgan's. The trek his cows did was quite incredible. They were thriving and producing huge amounts of solids. Morgan himself had beaten the odds after his dad, Richard, himself a Nuffield scholar, had tragically died during their first calving season. They didn't even have a milk contract at that point, and Morgan was only 17 years old. Determined to fulfill his dad's ambition to build a successful dairy business, he rose to the challenge. I hate the word context, but really, that's what this is about. In summary, right farm, right system, and right cow. This leads me to a bigger question. Does organic need to look different around the world? In America, a country I honestly thought I'd really hate, but ended up falling in love with. It was just like being in the movies. It's very much go large or go home. You are either what they call confinement dairy or organic. And this gives the consumer a clear clarity in what they're buying. In heat, many herds grazed at night and were housed during the day, sensible cow comfort. But then I saw tensions in the US organic rules. If a cow gets antibiotics there, it must leave the herd immediately. On some farms, I could see this delay in treatment, unnecessary welfare issues. Whatever the label, welfare must come first. On my 3-week tour, I met the two Eds. First was Ed Fry, who had negotiated a 5-year contract for his milk because his farm was close to a processing plant. In the US, distance really matters. It's a big country, and transport is really expensive. Ed was very much a business person first. He was happy to go organic to secure the best price. He took me to the fields, talking along the way about this magical crop called alfalfa. High protein, drought resilient, and 5 cuts a year. I started wondering if I'd found the silver bullet for organic dairy. When we got there, I realized it was just another name for lucerne. But the real lesson isn't that we're missing a miracle crop. It's that as climate changes, we must be open-minded to what we grow. Organic protein is one of the most expensive things in our system, and we must adapt as our climate changes. The second was Ed Zimber and his wife, Melanie. They had grown their business from 100 cows to 2,000 cows, grass-fed, organic. They were growing male sterile maize, sorghum, alfalfa, and getting over 30 litres a cow with no grain in the diet. Ed smiled as I left and said, "I won't tell you the price until you leave the country." it was about 80 pence a litre on 2,000 cows. If there is one thing that has become clear to me throughout this journey, that the future of organic dairy will not be won in the field alone. Storytelling is how we make what we do visible and relatable, and it's where organic historically has fallen pretty short. One of the best examples of storytelling done well is Yeo Valley. The Mead family did not just build a brand, they built a movement around their farm, connecting the consumer to a real place, real family, and real values. From clear, distinctive packaging to memorable campaigns like the Yeo Valley Wrap, they showed how authenticity and creativity can make organic part of the mainstream shop. In Denmark, floor graphics compare the living space of animals in different systems, giving shoppers instant visual context. In Taiwan, they have one clear national organic mark. In the UK, we have certifier logos, but we have no single sign for organic. I would love to see an organic mark that sits on the same place on every pack and ties all products in like a family. My recommendations range from practical on-farm changes to sector-wide asks. See my report for full details. To put some action behind my words, last year I helped set up the Organic Dairy Roundtable, bringing together processors, levy bodies, certifiers, farmers and DEFRA, probably the first time they've all been in the same room together. We meet 3 times a year, and I chair this group with the main focus of partnering for progress, building relationships during the good times so that when the bad times come, we have those connections in place. It's still relatively young, but we've made some great progress. And on our farm, we're challenging the protein issue. We're looking at how we can get better with our genetics, and we're learning from others. And when it came to taking on the second dairy unit, the idea of right farm, right system really came into play. On this farm, we made a conscious decision to run it conventionally because that's what fits the land, the cows, and the business best. So what is the future for organic dairy? I believe that organic dairy has a bright future if it can learn not to rest on its laurels, tell its story well, and appeal to the next generation. It began as a rebellion, and maybe it's time for another. Thank you.